The future of the MCU may be facing some shakeups. According to a new report from Variety, there's been plenty of behind-the-scenes turmoil for the once impervious franchise, ranging from talk of replacing Kang the Conqueror with Dr. Doom because of Jonathan Majors' legal troubles, to the troubled Mahershala Ali Blade reboot going through yet another rework, to, most surprising of all, Marvel's top brass floating the idea of bringing back the original Avengers to help right the ship.
Avengers! Assemble.
The fact that reviving the OG team is even being considered so soon after the Infinity Saga wrapped up indicates just how much the MCU's recent financial and critical disappointments have taken a toll. What was once Marvel's winning strategy, taking lower-tier characters like the Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy and turning them into A-listers, has now become a weakness, as new players like Shang-Chi and the Eternals just haven't caught on.
It's truly an honor to be in the presence of the great Eternals.
So how did this happen? Let's talk about how the MCU's greatest strength has now become its curse.
I could do this all.
The projects that were supposed to kickstart the multiverse saga and introduce a new generation of MCU heroes haven't laid as strong a foundation as Marvel's first wave of characters. Ironically enough, this means that the entire strategy that Kevin Feige used to launch the MCU isn't working as well now, as audiences are more attached to the characters that were supposed to be on the way out or already gone, and seem to have far less interest in the newbies.
Either forced to join their militia.
When Marvel Studios started making their own films in 2008 with Iron Man, it was a gamble to start a franchise centered around what were, at the time, many of Marvel's B-list properties. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and the Avengers weren't unknown quantities, but they certainly weren't worldwide icons in the same way Spider-Man or the X-Men were. Marvel built their early films around these characters, ones that audiences were passingly familiar with but didn't have great investment in. This turned out to be a winning strategy, allowing the MCU the freedom to reinvent the main Avengers roster into the sorts of heroes that resonated with modern audiences, while still having plenty of creative DNA that came straight from the source material.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
This led to the Avengers movie in 2012 becoming a smash hit that gave the MCU a global cultural footprint. Yet, the shelf life of these characters had an intended endpoint, the final confrontation with Thanos. Beginning with the mid-credits scene of the Avengers, Marvel made clear their intention to build a long-running storyline across their various films, one that would increasingly center around the Mad Titan and the Infinity Stones. Even if the actual connective tissue was mostly in the margins of each individual film, the overall momentum, the feeling of every installment being a piece of a greater whole, helped create long-term investment for the inevitable finale in Avengers Endgame. And that movie took its finale status quite seriously, ending with both Iron Man and Black Widow dead, and an elderly Steve Rogers passing the mantle of Captain America to Sam Wilson. Whether Marvel had other plans at the time or not, everything about the movie itself signaled to audiences that the era of this incarnation of the Avengers was over.
And again, that's the hero gig. Part of the journey is the end.
However, satisfactorily paying off that long-term storyline came at a cost. It set Marvel back to almost square one in terms of building investment in their next batch of characters. There was no longer a guarantee of audiences coming to care about the next lineup of properties. And there was now cultural baggage associated with the franchise because so many of the characters that audiences now loved were either dead, retiring, or at a point in their arc that was difficult to build off of. Beyond the already mentioned heroes, Thor and Hulk have struggled to find purpose in post-Endgame projects. Hawkeye now shares his mantle with Kate Bishop, Scarlet Witch turned evil and seemingly died by suicide. The original Guardians of the Galaxy team have broken up, and T'Challa has died due to Chadwick Boseman's tragic passing. This would all be manageable if Marvel had a slew of fresh faces ready to drive their next saga, but that part of the equation hasn't gone as smoothly as the studio likely hoped.
Guys, stay safe. Welcome to the circus.
Much has been made about how Phase 4 of the MCU didn't get as strong a reception as the first 3. From the general feel that it needed a more coherent plan, to having more interesting villains than heroes, to including the first MCU film to receive outright negative reviews with Eternals, Marvel's didn't exactly start off on the best foot with the Multiverse Saga. However, such problems could have been mitigated if they'd found a new group of core characters to replace the original Avengers that audiences connected with. Unfortunately, the handful of new properties have struggled to establish their heroes as ones capable of carrying the MCU's flag. In fact, nearly every attempt has found itself stifled in some way or another.
So now that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are both gone, who do you think's gonna lead the Avengers?
I could lead them.
We've already mentioned Eternals' poor reception, but even movies like Shang-Chi and The Legend of the Ten Rings, which had far better reviews, haven't picked up the same momentum as the Phase 1 hero introductions. Despite the film doing well enough to get a sequel announcement, that project has failed to materialize, nor has Shang-Chi or any of his supporting cast made any further MCU appearances. The loose end of the titular rings, apparently emitting some sort of signal into space in the post-credits scene, has not been followed up on, even in passing. The Eternals and Shang-Chi were the two big attempts to kickstart new film franchises in Phase 4, and neither seems to have paid off.
I mean, we just started shooting this movie. It's the first of a trilogy.
And then there's the Disney Plus shows. Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, and She-Hulk were all introduced in self-titled streaming series, which have been dragged down with mixed receptions and in some cases VFX problems from overworked effects houses struggling to keep up with Marvel's increased output. Many key members of the Young Avengers lineup have popped up in various capacities, but there's been no in-universe indication that they know each other or that the team is actually intended to come together in a future project. Despite so many new characters being introduced that it can be hard to keep track of them all, there arguably hasn't been a single new hero introduced in the Multiverse Saga that has become an immediately identifiable audience favorite to build the next big storyline around. Distressingly, the one new character they did have a plan for, Kang the Conqueror, now might not even have a future in the series.
Thanks for the lesson. But I don't need you to tell me who I am.
To be crystal clear, none of this is a death sentence for the MCU.
I am inevitable.
Most of the films are still making profits, and the Variety report indicates that Marvel executives are aware of the franchise's problems and are actively looking for solutions. A course correction that helps smooth all of this over is certainly in the cards, but it will involve taking a hard look at how we got here and making choices that satisfy both the creative and business demands of managing such a long-running franchise. What has become apparent is that the current strategy of quantity over quality, trying to cross-pollinate film and television continuity, and a fix-it-and-post mentality is no longer working, and is in fact only exacerbating the problem of audiences simply not being as attached to the new MCU characters as compared to the old ones. Worse still, the Multiverse Saga's recurring tendency to bring back versions of characters from previous non-MCU franchises feels like a half measure at best and a creative death spiral at worst. While having Tom Holland, Tobey Maguire, and Andrew Garfield interact did make for an enjoyable setup in Spider-Man No Way Home, and Wanda massacring the Illuminati in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was a delightfully grisly surprise, refusing to recast iconic roles and trying to mine nostalgia for versions of characters who are past their expiration date speaks to a lack of conviction in charting a new course, which would only get worse if Marvel pulls the trigger on reuniting the original Avengers.
Well, looks like we're improvising.
That's not to say there wouldn't be a surface-level gratification in seeing the classic Avengers lineup should Marvel choose to take that path, but it would also signal that they have essentially surrendered on ever moving forward, especially when they now have access to the deep well of characters from the X-Men and Fantastic Four franchises. It seems remarkably short-sighted to continue looking backward.
Why did you go to the same place twice? I don't know, I'm trying to connect the dots. I mean, this isn't a pivot point in history.
Marvel built their empire in the first place because they looked at less popular characters and put their faith in a plan to make them into new stars who could stand up to their old ones. If they chose a handful of characters and put that level of effort in again, perhaps the MCU could finally return to doing what it does best.
You can't afford me.
What do you think of the current state of affairs in the MCU? Tell us in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe to IGN wherever you like to watch.